What would you do?
I think he's got an impossible job, and I wouldn't want to. I don't want to answer that question. I want to answer the question about what the EU should do. And I actually think that they should have a completely different attitude to Greece at the moment. I think the poor Greek people have been dumped upon by the Troika with their failed austerity policies. I mean, everybody has this idea that the Greeks have been giving out sort of gold-plated pensions and all this sort of stuff. A lot of the money that they spent, shamefully, was on super military weapons, on submarines, on F-16 fighters, and they bought them from mostly Germany. Do you know that for the 5 years after the Greeks came in, they had the 4th largest military spending conventional weapon in the world?
But this was their elected government.
It was their elected government.
Does the blame not fall on the people of Greece?
It falls on their government and the people who made those stupid decisions. But
they were elected by the people.
No, I'm condemning that. I'm condemning that. I mean, I think they got themselves into an absolute mess. But the really interesting thing is they bought a lot of them off the Germans at the time, encouraging them to take up debt. And now there's this extraordinary situation where they have to borrow money to pay back their bankers that they owe, and nothing is actually happening apart from the fact that the Greek people are getting poorer and poorer, 50% youth unemployment, and if we want to see a tragedy in Europe, if we want to see the far right rise again as these things happen, I'm afraid that's where it's going to happen. Okay. And it's a real, real danger and a tragedy.
Fraser Nelson.
If I could do one thing for Greece, I'd give it what a country in trouble needs more than anything else, and that's its own currency. Yeah. I mean, that is what Greece would... If they still had the drachma would plunge in value, Greek goods would be incredibly cheap. Not only could we all go there on holiday, but its exports would be a lot better. That's how countries get out of a mess. That's how we get out of the mess. On Black Wednesday, we came out of the ERM, the proto-Euro thing. It was painful at the time, but then our huge recovery started. I mean, the pound has been such an asset to us. When the crisis struck, the pound was devalued, we became more competitive. It's such a help. But right now, when they're locked in the euro, they can't do that. They have to go through this kind of pseudo-austerity, where they've got to do this internal devaluation. And it's heartbreaking seeing the things that right now the EU are asking the Greek government for. You know, to double the VAT on restaurants, to cut the government budget even more, and all for what? All to remain part of this bizarre euro project.
If you're right, why should they be so keen to remain in the euro?
Well, because leaving it is a painful process. We found that out 20 years. There's no denying. There's no good option for Greece. They've just got the choice of 2 bad options. But I reckon that the pain of leaving the euro now and defaulting is lesser evil. The greater evil is being in this Groundhog Day of negotiations with the EU every 6 months and putting through these cuts that are causing so much incredible misery to the Greek people.
What do you think the outcome will be?
What do you think the outcome will be? Well, I actually think that the Greek government almost want to get kicked out. Oh. I mean, you know, the Greek, they're on a mandate to stay in the EU and get a deal. Those 2 things can't happen. I think they know that.
All right. The man by the camera here, with the camera on the left.
Oh, yes, hello, yes. You said that they'd spent money on weapons, didn't you? Did you say they spent money on weapons?
Yes, Giles Fraser said that, yes.
Yes, why didn't they spend the money on the poor people in Greece, rather than the weapons?
Giles?
Well, that's exactly right. I think that the military spending has been... I mean, it's cut back now, but it's part of the reason that's got them into all sorts of trouble. And yes, I mean, I have to say, I also agree with Fraser Nelson about the drachma. I think, actually, they have to go through that process, and I actually think that this is it could be the beginning of the end of the whole European project. Yes. What's happened here?
Well, not just the euro, but the EU
as well. I think the whole idea that the EU in the 70s and 80s was this benign body which was sort of socially sort of liberal and fine. Actually, I think that has now been shown up for something, and you know, I'm a lefty. I used to believe in that project, but I think I don't believe in that project anymore.
You'll vote out, will you?
I think I will vote out. I think that tradition of people like Tony Benn, I think they were right about the European Union, and I think that the lefties need to start saying that a bit more now.
Okay. Bravo. You said.